Commissioner Casterline.
Here.
Commissioner Russo.
Here.
Commissioner Laubach.
Here.
Judge Mills.
Here, we do have a form. Item number 1, approve staff request or reject all responses received from the disaster emergency response and recovery service request for proposal. I make the motion.
I second that.
Second, Commissioner Russo.
Now, why are we doing this?
We're doing this because we received 2 responses, which were neither one. There was a lot of confusion with this RFP, and so we did not receive a response that would take care of the situation that we have.
So it's not that we didn't receive responses, it's just
They
it
were
wasn't clear.
they were not clear, they were non-responsive, so we're asking to reject those, and then the next couple of items we'll be asking to redo that. And we're splitting, we had done it originally as one RFP, but that was part of the confusion, so now we want to split it into 2 RFPs. One would be the recovery, and one would be response, the immediate response if we needed generators, that type of
Right.
stuff.
Okay.
So instead of trying to do it as one, we're splitting them into 2.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, I'm not sure I've discovered when I tried to relay this to someone that I didn't fully understand the difference between the immediate recovery and the long terms. I understand the immediate parts, bringing generators.
Exactly, and what we want to do with the long term is basically have somebody who can come in if we have buildings that need to be, temporary buildings that need to be available, if we have things that need to be tarped, if we have any construction that needs to be done.
Basically, that is
Basically,
immediate. So immediate would be more like just getting generators in and.
right, yes, ma'am, equipment, if we've got equipment that need to pull some, a big crane or something that has to pull something off of a building, a tree or something.
But it's
those
not
type of
the same
things.
as really long-term, like
Exactly.
where we rebuild with insurance proceeds.
Exactly.
So those were the
That's what the second RFP would be, the recovery.
Okay, so my other question is, I think you said we only got 2 responses. Do we have compliance problems where we need 3, or 3 is just better?
Well, no, 3 would be nice. We don't have a compliance problem with that. The problem with the 2 that we received is they didn't.
No, I
meet
understand the 2 weren't good enough,
requirement.
but
Yeah.
it's not also a problem that we only got 2, except that we always want more.
It would be nice to have more than
But we
2, but
don't
it was
have
not an
a
issue.
procurement guidelines problem with that. Okay.
And we will accept, if they're split into 2, we may have one company that's good at this and another company that's good at that.
Yes, sir.
How are we gonna correlate that?
Quite finished, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wendy,
Well,
please.
I did say I only had 2 questions, so I misled you. My third question is, so didn't our contract expire earlier this week, and are we concerned about the fact we're now applying without a contract?
Our contracts have expired, and yes, we want to do this as quickly as possible because we are in hurricane season. Because of the timing, even if we do this now, reject and go out for new bids, it's gonna be mid-July before we get a contract in place.
We've been working on this since last fall.
It's very
where we've run out.
detailed and it's just been something that's been ongoing, trying to figure out what we wanted, how we did it. We've never done this before, so it was,
Never done what before?
we have not done an RFP like this before. This
Before
staff.
we found that.
Staff.
Okay, so the county has done it before. with
The
this staff.
recovery one was the one that we were
Let me
talking about.
clarify, are you saying the county has done it before, but this particular staff has not done it?
Exactly.
Well, whenever we had Harvey, Crowder Gulf, I'm just using them, Crowder Gulf came in and they did a lot of stuff that was not in their contract because we've been 40 years without a major disaster. So I see where we really need to clean up because you have one is the immediate problem and then there's long lasting
It's
problem.
actually 4. There will end up being 4 different contracts, and it could be with the same contractor or 4 different contractors.
Oh, sorry.
That's it. So the first one is for immediate emergency response, and that's the group of people who come in, put the tarps on the roofs, bring us the generators, bring us the temporary bathrooms, the kitchens, feed us, immediate response. And then you have the debris removal and remediation, and then you have debris monitoring. And then you have the long-term recovery, which is, I don't want to call it that. We're going to call it recovery and restoration services. Come in and they will help us once we have our insurance claims numbers. They will help us make repairs. They will operate similarly in providing services like North Star did. But North Star provided those services through RPA. This avoids going through an intermediary, and we would contract directly with the service provider to come in and make those repairs for us. And they would also do project management, regular reporting. I'll make sure that's in the contract, that they have to come to Commissioners Court and report at length and detail. They also will negotiate with the insurance companies for us or with us. That's part of our scope. And having a project manager involved all the time, on site, in town, the whole time, to make sure they're looking at projects day to day. Also, we will have the opportunity to inspect construction once it's complete and accept the work. That's something that hasn't happened with our Harvey recovery. RPA has been making those decisions, whether work is acceptable, being the contract holder directly with the construction contractor. So this will be a different scenario. The county will have more involvement and more control over how things proceed.
Okay, so we're gonna have two kinds of disaster recovery, one immediate, one longer term. Is there gonna be a third one for the really long term where we supervise, or that's part of the second?
That's the same
Part of
thing.
the separate
It's-
one, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
recovery
the
and
second one.
restoration.
Up to now, sorry,
Tindem is working on having a Tindem employee in every county in the state of Texas.
That'd be great.
As soon as possible. All we have to do is give them a office space to work in. It's not gonna happen overnight, but they're working on getting that done, getting them trained. And emergency management coordinators will have to go to a training academy also. And in the future, things will hopefully run a lot smoother, but that's the future.
Is Tina looking to do that just before any storm hits, or once a disaster hits, it will
No,
implant a person
no, they'll put one in here permanently year round.
proactively?
That would be wonderful.
so our prior contractual arrangement with Crowder was just the immediate and sort of.
They're four different things here.
They're only debris removal.
That's just debris
The,
removal.
the,
Okay, who was our general emergency response
RPA.
contract?
the one that, okay, and we also had a contract with Garner
And Thompson.
and Thompson Consulting. They did the monitoring, but Garner is the one that came in and had the heavy equipment, had some of this stuff. Their contract is up, so that's part of what this is replacing that, or putting an RFP out to replace that, not replacing Garner. They are.
And hopefully they'll respond.
But this RFP is in part to consider replacing RPA.
We already, okay, so when you renewed the insurance contract earlier this year, we discussed that using the optional concierge services that we used after Harvey isn't something that we have to do, and it's not something that we agreed to do just by renewing our coverage. We discussed that at the time. So this would be, we discussed the possibility that we would engage a recovery and restoration company on our own instead of having RPA do that for us.
Now, I thought RPA told us that
She's not correct.
there is no separate contract. Are we saying there is a separate
There
contract?
is no separate contract, but that's a concierge service that's separate from our general insurance policy. They're two separate
It's
things.
it's something.
So
they
to me,
provide.
we need to, and Jackie and I talked about this the other day, we need to get a plain in writing signed deal from GSM or whoever, that the insurance that we got does not require us to have RPA oversee the rebuilding.
I'd be happy
Because
with-
she insinuated at that meeting, I felt like,
She did.
that we didn't have a choice.
That's incorrect.
And
That's incorrect.
so to
We had a
me,
choice.
I'm just saying, let's get something
I'd be
signed
happy
by
with it.
them
Commission
that is
says that and share it.
plain as can be, that that's not the case with our,
She even said during the
Renew.
Harvey recovery, she told us multiple times, you don't even have to use us for this if you don't like what we're doing. And that's true. It was always optional.
Okay, now, so before we talk about what we might change in the future, I'm trying to get a handle on the status quo. That I didn't understand, I think, until this morning, that RPA was was acting in the nature of one of our disaster recovery contracts, just like we have Chuck Protocol to do the debris removal and another company to do the debris removal monitoring. There is a third kind of sort of more extensive disaster recovery contract, which we have done an RFP process for, but didn't yield enough good responses. So we're going to say no to both of them. Are we talking about hire, do we have a contract similar to that with RFP, or do we only have an insurance contract with RFP?
Our RPA.
RPA, we only have an insurance contract with them, but one of the services that they provide with that insurance is your,
The concierge,
yes.
but that's not in writing in a contract.
No,
So it's
it's
a
not
service that they
required.
provide in an informal way. We don't have any paper to back that up. But you're
Right.
talking about now having a contract that would be in writing on paper with
Yes.
somebody.
With specific roles, duties, responsibilities, yes.
And so far, RPA has not participated in an RFP toward that goal, but others have, although we're not happy with
Yes.
the proposal so far.
Yes.
But RPA probably wouldn't ever respond to something like that. It would be the contractor that they engage. So it would be a company like North Star or FPS Recovery. It would be companies like that that would come in and do the reconstruction and restoration after the initial recovery phase is
So
over.
if we go
I mean, the
forward,
initial response phase.
if we go forward with this RFP for the two kinds of disaster recovery, immediate and more, medium term, that would completely substitute for the special unwritten what we've been calling concierge services from RFP, RPA. I keep saying. And that's what we would be pushing to get done by July if we restart the RFP process now.
Yes.
When we
yes,
renewed our insurance, was that March?
Yes.
That's when we first talked about doing this. And when we made the recommendation that we go ahead and renew with RPA, I know that Jackie and I both told you that we didn't think that we should continue to use RPA probably if we have another disaster.
So our
We
current,
shouldn't use them in
Those
the
extra
capacity of
services.
being the contract manager.
That's
Right.
our
Or-
current insurance contract is a more traditional insurance
Yes,
policy. It does not call for anybody else to stand between us and the insurer. We receive the money, we hire the contractors, we review the work, and we decide when we're.
Right.
yes.
They still offer those services, and if we don't do something like this, they will feel like they can step in and do it because they still offer
For
that.
example,
And the
we could-
controversy with RPA is we claim we can stop doing it that way for the 5-year-old Harvey claims, and RPA apparently believes that's not true. I don't agree, but that was her claim, that we can't stop.
I think she knows it's true because she has told us before.
I'm just talking about what she claimed in court, trying to.
I
fix what
understand
we're talking about.
that.
Okay, so during that conversation at the last commissioner's court, I think there were quite a few things that were said that were slightly accurate and slightly inaccurate. And that opinion that she gave about what our options are legally, you have to.
She kind of backed off thinking it was legal and started to say it was just impractical.
If
for
it's
us to
something
think
she
of.
doesn't like and doesn't think we should do, that's an absolutely valid comment. I would caution anyone who's not an attorney from giving an opinion on whether something is legal. And she
I'm
did
not trying
back
to say
off.
she was right or wrong.
I know you're not.
I'm just
What
trying
I'm
to
saying,
clarify what subject matter she was on, and it seems to be a similar subject matter to what we're talking about today.
it is except for, this is from this point moving forward. This company that we seek right now for recovery and restoration would not be looking backward at old damages. It would be, they would come and do an assessment of our condition of our items, our property now.
Right.
And in the event that we have another emergency, that's when they would step in and take over doing those things for us.
So-
It doesn't have anything to do with the Harvey claims.
Several weeks ago, when we were talking about bringing in somebody who would be our consultant on the casualty claims. That's this company, that's what we're now talking about in this RFP, or that would be a separate
That's a
consultant.
separate.
So we have another RFP going for
We
that.
don't yet.
Or we're thinking about doing that soon.
Except for the last commissioner's court, Renee was kind of instructed to go ahead and take people through the buildings. So it looks like FPS and RPA are still working those claims.
That was sort of on hold, but it's what that is what we
We've
were talking about
discussed it.
doing. Right.
I think, I thought she was coming back in 2 weeks, according to the meeting.
She was, except for she isn't going to be because she's quarantined right
Yeah, she got COVID for the third thing.
But I think
We're
at some
afraid
point in
of
time, I think we probably all realize that we're gonna have to, the question's gonna come up, okay, what do we do to cut this relationship off and get it taken care of? Because if it continues to drag out like it has been, at some point in time, we're gonna, I think, hit the spot that we want to finalize and get through with it and move on however we have to. So,
But this is just looking for here going forward.
Yes.
We can talk about Harvey.
And
some other
similar to
time, but here
Crowder,
going
see,
forward, we need to
like
do
Crowder
something.
Gulf, we had the contract with them quite a few years before Harvey, and it's a no cost, just like this one.
Right.
We don't pay anything for it until the event happens, and
They're on
like I
free
say,
standby. Yeah.
and I'm assuming that all of these deals were like
And then
that.
we had the,
We don't pay unless they come in.
then we had the safeguard of having the auditor, the debris auditor come in and they had to sign off on
Okay.
everything.
I have created a sheet that should help. So this is what we currently have. We have response being RPA, debris removal being Crowder Gulf, debris monitoring is Thompson Consulting. In equipment, we have that contract with Garner that wasn't really utilized, but we had it.
And the
And the
recovery,
recovery-
basically generators kind of stuff.
If we have
Broken
operators,
equipment.
we just need the equipment for a short period of time. They would help us find it, rent it, bring it to us, all that. And then recovery and restoration, RPA.
And that was RPA is both response and recovery and restoration.
Yes.
And how do those?
That's how we originally did our RFP. And we figured out after we got the responses that we needed to really drill down what our scope is and separate those services.
Okay, so
Because
what's
some people-
response?
Response is immediately coming, putting the tarps over the roofs, bringing us temporary bathrooms, setting up the kitchen, feeding us meals, generators, getting us up and running.
And equipment would be more like,
Move debris.
move debris
Okay,
around.
so
kind of
if we
stuff
do
on
it this
wheels.
way, we're talking about, we won't have a separate one for that.
That'll be part of
Equipment will be
response.
this.
Right,
Yes.
and Garner, equipment was Garner, and we never used it.
Well, yes.
Only time we used it was in Harvey for a couple of pieces of equipment.
But we
Very minimal.
weren't,
So that's not been a big piece of our.
no, but we decided that it makes sense to separate this. And that's what we're asking to do today. We have also really done more with the scope on this.
Okay, so recovery and restoration is the RPA-like piece. That's
Yes.
what we think of as concierge,
Yes.
working with our insurance company. Response is more like bringing in the port cans and generators.
Yes, and then of course debris removal is a separate contract and debris monitoring is a separate contract.
Right.
So if you
That was getting the
approve,
trees off the streets, and that's what Crowder Gulf did with Thompson running around behind them, making sure they monitor.
and not just trees, any kind of debris
I know.
and removing citizens' debris and taking it to a site that's then.
Jump on the streets, basically.
Yes.
And the monitoring is required by FEMA. That's the
Right.
only way that they will.
Right, so they were
reimburse.
basically going around making sure FEMA will be completely happy and.
Yes, they
And
actually
they
measured
turned some of the
everything.
stuff down. Some of the stuff
Yeah, it
that-
had to be eligible and it
Like-
had to be, I mean, every limb, they had to take a picture of it with a tape measure and had to have the latitude and longitude. I mean, it was.
But that was what protected us
Real.
against unexpected non-reimbursement.
Yes,
Yes, but with your approval today, we'll end up with 4 different contracts that may be the same contractor who gets one of them or 4 different contractors, just so long as the pieces can work together. For example, when response is happening, you're putting the tarp on the roof, these people are coming to do their initial assessment to
Right.
damage. So you'll have people from probably all 4 of these contracts here at the beginning to look at and assess the situation.
Now,
And then these people will go away and then come back later when it's time to start their part of the work.
with these separate contractors, how are we going to coordinate and monitor that they're doing what they're saying they're doing? We had a real good experience with Crowder Gulf. We had some ups and downs and everything. And I'm not pushing Crowder Gulf. I'm just saying we had a real good experience with them. But we really didn't have anybody other than the county judge that had it handfuls anyway, that was really monitoring anything that was going on. Jackie was, and her staff was monitoring, the expenditures that we were out and everything, but we really didn't have a coordinator.
I would think.
Valerie did. Valerie was
Valerie.
very, very involved in that, yes.
And what about the long-term recovery team? Were they not doing some of that?
No,
Yeah,
that was
they just-
after.
That was
That was kind of after the fact, but also like Crowder Gulf and them, they were coming to the EOC on regular meetings and basically briefing everybody there on what was going
But
on.
Valerie
things like
worked,
that.
coordinated and
Yeah.
worked with all of that debris removal and monitoring and everything. She was very, very involved in it.
That's good.
Pretty much with, that had to do with clearing the streets off, not so much with, who was overseeing what was going on with all the buildings.
Right, this was just the
That was our-
debris
Okay,
removal.
that was our question, who was?
Renee was overseeing all the.
Renee, right, okay. So that'd be buildings, facilities.
Yes.
Well, she She was coordinating, I would say she was acting as the county's liaison with RPA, because
Right.
technically RPA was responsible for all of that.
Right.
RPA was responsible for coordinating the
But somebody
construction.
somebody has to supervise RPA, and that basically was Renee.
No, I don't think that's fair. I think
No,
that
that's
it would be the commissioner's court that would be supervising RPA.
The Commissioner's Court was not brought any information about RPA. I'm wondering who on the staff was keeping an eye on it.
We weren't supposed to have to. That's not the best answer, but that's the truth.
Somebody always has to be keeping an eye on our contractors, and I'm just trying to figure out.
They're not
who
our contractors, though, like RPA is.
RPA was.
But the whole idea of
Who
RPA
was
coming,
keeping an eye on RPA is my
the whole,
question.
the commissioner's court, the whole idea with RPA coming in and doing this,
The Commissioner's Court doesn't have any power to keep an eye on anything that doesn't get brought before the Commissioner's.
which is
Court.
why we need to have a contract that requires it to be brought to you regularly. That's the answer.
And that's being implemented into the new RFPs.
Yes,
And if they don't come,
you fire them.
Could I
Then it
call a
would be in
question?
breach.
Call the question?
I'd like to.
before, there's one more thing I need to ask, and that is what new particular system are we setting up so that we don't let our contracts
We have,
completely expire before we have found a replacement? We have to have some kind of a way of seeing this deadline's approaching. It's a hard deadline.
We have a spreadsheet that we're working on so that we can have things pop up and calendars type things, so we can keep track of them.
that's why we asked for the contract
Can we
person.
get some kind of a report on what contracts deadline, expiration dates are coming up?
We don't have that yet.
We're working on that. Okay, so can we, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to put something like that together. Do you think we might be able to see that at the next meeting?
No.
Oh.
No,
How do we know no more contracts are expiring next week?
we
There
don't.
has to be some general way of.
It's up to the departments that work with those contracts to bring them up for renewal.
Until we get our person on board to get those things built, we do rely on the departments to bring it to us that they've got a contract that's,
What department would have brought you this one?
Well,
I mean, some of them don't seem to be like really tight. that
Valerie
security
brought
too.
some of it to us, and that's what we've been working on, and we've been working with her, getting some of this done. Some of it we just knew because we just did an extension last year just to carry us through through last season, and so we knew this was coming. We started working on it, but it's a big document.
Between-
It's a lot of work.
between the auditor's office and the attorney's office, we should be able to have
We're working
a
on it.
pretty good idea of where we are at any given time. I would think that once you get that on board, it would be good. You know, if it just, even if it gets to be routine, it would be good to have contracts due, 30 days out, 6 days out
That's exactly
at
what
least
our
once a
plan
month
is.
at a board meeting.
We have a plan in place. We just haven't had our person come on board yet to help start implementing.
No,
So
we're-
the person is
Tracy.
Contract compliance.
coming on to work for.
She's coming into work for us.
For you.
Yes.
What? Yeah. Could we ping all the departments in the meantime and say, just for now, since we don't have this thing in place, can you warn us of anything that's gonna expire in the next month?
That's not enough
2
time.
months?
They actually need to come to,
3 months
3
ahead,
months.
4 months
Can
out.
you ping all the departments
Some
and
of
say,
them-
if you've got anything expiring in 3 months, please raise a red flag
I would
right now?
say it's
6
even.
months or something.
6 months, whatever the number is,
Well,
you tell me.
whenever we
I'm going
do
to
our.
tell you why there's such a problem.
Whenever we do our budget, it may be too late this year to do it, but from this point on, anytime we do our budget, we should have a schedule at the time that we accept the budget of when contracts are going to be due during that budget time as best we can. And it'll take a while to do that. But,
But for now, could we please ping every department and say, warn us 6 months, anything in the next 6
Exactly.
months?
If they're wanting to terminate something, then we need as much notice as possible, because sometimes we have no termination clause in some of these agreements. Or we have a termination clause that requires us to give 120 days written notice or 90 days written notice. They're all different.
Right, I mean, so you're explaining to me why what I'm suggesting is a good idea, and I'm asking.
I'm telling you, it's a good idea. I'm explaining to you why it's so difficult to tell the people when to come to us, because it depends on what they want to do.
Okay, then maybe the request to them has to be stated in terms of, give us warning of anything that within the next 6 months is gonna hit one of these critical periods, but that's what I'm asking. Can we please do that? We shouldn't be here today to
do our
discuss a
very
contract.
best to get everyone to do that for us. And we will look at what we know,
Right,
you know, because we do keep all of the contracts. And we will take the time, but it's not gonna be within 30 days or something to be able to give it to y'all. It will take us a little bit more time than
It'll take a
that.
long time because we won't know about all the contracts immediately because they're not all in one place. So our contracts person will have to come on and get with departments and make sure that she has all of them. What's happened in the past, and Carrie, I'm sure, is well aware of this, is there hasn't been a central depository. And that's a problem. It's impossible for us to audit to see when things are gonna expire if they're not all in one place.
Yeah.
We have contracts I've never heard of that I find out are expiring after they've expired or with 2 weeks before. So when I'm asked to review something, negotiate a renewal, and do all of it within 2 weeks, and on top of everything else, it's not really humanly possible. So we need to solve this by having a central repository.
well, I couldn't agree with you more about a central repository, I clearly need that.
So do we have a plan?
Yes,
We do have a
Ma'am, call
plan.
the question.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava,
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous.
I move to approve the issuance of a new request for proposal for disaster emergency response services, RFP number 2022-001.
Second,
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Lova. Any discussion? Roll call.
It pretty much.
I was gonna say, you know, these were the ones that we've been discussing, so.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item number 3.
I move to
On the
approve the
third one,
report.
on the third one, I need to make a slight change to the title of the RFP. It should be request for proposals for the disaster recovery and restoration services.
Instead of emergency recovery. Okay.
Exactly. The name is changed
So moved.
slightly.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Castellano. Any discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item number
I
4.
move to approve selecting the proposal submitted by Crowder Gulf for disaster debris management, debris removal, and debris disposal services.
I second that.
Motion made and seconded, Commissioner Russo. Any discussion? Roll call.
I did, I'm sorry, Judge, I did give y'all some spreadsheets. The raters, as you can see, the raters rated Crowder Gulf #1. Crowder Gulf's prices are a little bit more than Look Good or whatever, I don't remember what the name was. They did not, Looks Great. I couldn't remember what their name was. We're recommending it because of our experience with Crowder Gulf. They were very, very learned. They knew, you know, our concern. They had some deep pockets and I mean, they had to wait. They understood going in that they were gonna have to wait till we got reimbursed to pay
They carried
the
a
bill.
huge
So they
bill.
carried some pretty good sized bills for
90
us.
days, wasn't it?
Some of them were longer than that when we had to get an amendment to something. So, you know, they were very,
And they were surprisingly easy to work with.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you didn't run into obstacles where, you know, things like that, so.
Valerie gave them a very high recommendation when I called her. And I like the fact that they added in their response that they paid their subcontractors weekly and they never delayed in the payment, which keeps tremendous loyalty in the subcontractor base that they use. And they also provided, and I talked to someone in your office, Jackie, a sample of a flyer that could be used as well as other public information as the storm is coming in and especially after the storm, letting you know how to place your debris and how to work.
I did see that.
And to have that sort of resource available from the contractor would be invaluable.
And I will say, they communicated wonderfully with the public. They always came to the emergency meetings, answered the phone. They gave straight answers to straight questions, and they just seemed to give excellent service.
Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro,
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous. Item number 5.
I move to approve selecting the proposal submitted by Thompson's Consulting for monitoring service related to disaster debris removal and disposal.
I'll second that.
Motion made, second.
I only have one item on that. Usually on the agenda item at the bottom, it says staff recommends blah, blah, blah. And that wasn't on here. That's not a huge issue, is it?
No, that's just something we do as a courtesy.
They are the ones we use. before.
They are the ones that we used
Yeah.
last time. As you know, or if you remember, we didn't realize until like a week, well, actually till it happened, that we even had to have monitors. So they were very responsive. It was all done online and had no issues.
And
No
I
issues
think
at all.
they had probably worked, I don't remember, but I think they had worked with Crowder Gulf before.
Yes.
Probably.
But they really had a good working relationship
Yes.
between the two of them. And
The other RFP that we did receive for this was basically non-responsive. They left out a lot of information, so,
The other thing about Thompson Consulting is we really never had a problem between them and FEMA on any of their accounts.
no.
And that was, I mean, we're not talking about 100 counts, we're talking about thousands.
Oh, it was.
Thousands and thousands of counts.
$43 million is
Yeah.
what they assisted us in getting reimbursed for, because everything had to go through them.
Mhm.
And even Crowder Gulf's bill went through them to get approved before they would pay them. So staff recommends Thompson
Any
Consulting.
further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Cheney.
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo.
Aye.
Mr. Lollabach.
Aye.
Judge Mills.
Aye, unanimous.
to approve entering into a multiple jurisdictional memorandum of understanding for debris removal management and debris removal for a 5-year period beginning June 1st, 2022 through May 31st, 2027.
I'll second that.
I
Motion made and second, Commissioner Cheney.
was actually going to ask to table this, although the item that Commissioner Casterline just read, as I'm looking at the agenda item memorandum, it says a 5-year period beginning January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2027. So when exactly would this contract be run?
Well, the current contract runs until December of this year, but we felt like to make it concurrent with all of these, so we have them all at one time and we don't have to remember 6 months down the road, we've got to do another contract. We want to put it in line with the same date as the others and have it
So
run
June
the same. So June 1 would be the date.
The part that has to be legally compliant is the agenda itself. The memorandum is an extra. So as long as the agenda language reflects what the agreement would be, which I believe it does, according to Jackie, then we don't have a legal compliance problem the way that that's worded.
But for right now, we're covered until the end of the year. You know, we're talking about getting all of the other local governments to switch over to a June 1st schedule as well. So I mean, in other words, this is a memorandum of understanding of all of the other local governments.
All this, yes, but it doesn't cost them anything. It doesn't say,
I'm just saying,
it doesn't change.
we're gonna have to go around to them all and ask.
You've already distributed it to all the entities that it's written.
Because I had the same concern that a contract that's expiring in 6 months is not an appropriate subject for a special meeting.
Right, I did too, and the fact that I don't have the previous MOU, and my understanding is terms in the other MOU have been changed from this MOU. And I would like to either have a chance to see that and evaluate that.
I would
There's no reason why you can't. I mean, we
I
did.
would
Then
also
maybe
like to
take,
table
I
this
move
until
to
the
table
next.
this.
The only reason we added it to this meeting, it goes with the other topics of debris.
Understand.
And I like that we're beginning to discuss it today, but I still would rather not
Okay.
actually vote on it. So I guess I formally moved to table.
Well, it was,
I move to table.
Well, okay, then well, you're talking about maybe doing it, but if you've actually done it, then I second.
well, do we need to take Terry Watson, do we need to take a vote on the first motion? Or do
We
we
vote on
have
the
the
table
person that made
first.
that first motion revise their motion?
I think you vote on the second one first.
We're on the second one,
It was actually,
We're not actually revising the original, we're just asking to table it until June 13th.
but that's a revision from the original motion.
I don't care,
So you need to make a sub motion.
just trying to help.
Okay, then I would call the tabling question.
Yes, sir.
Motion was made by Commissioner Russo, I believe.
Yes,
Second,
seconded by me.
Commissioner Law to table this item number 6. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Okay, so this is on the table.
Yes.
And if that table fails, then we go back to the
Right.
first.
Original.
All right, so table, Commissioner Cheney,
Nay.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava, Judge Mills.
Aye.
Okay,
Item number 7.
Move to approve accounts payable and payroll liability.
Second.
Motion made, second, Commissioner Castro.
I have a couple of discussion things. First one, there was, do you have that list? Or-
There's only this. There's some payroll liabilities on it.
No, there were some other accounts payable on that list that Sue sent me.
But I didn't get the, I didn't, I'm sorry, I thought the only thing, if there's anything else, it was,
Well, let me just ask you, maybe you can just, one is more procedural question, but I'm concerned about it. It shows account 135-300-497. The payee was Prosperity Bank, but the reason was a non-sufficient fund check for a Cobra payment. What's our protocol on that? If someone who we're billing for Cobra gives us a check that doesn't clear,
well, they will approach that person and try to get it, or get it paid, and if not, then they will have
Cancel
to
the
cancel
Cobra?
the Cobra.
okay. Second one,
That's what they should do anyway.
okay. Second one, account 240-618-530 to Prosperity Bank. And the reasons purchase property Southeast Lamar, it was 142,000 plus.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm thinking, is that for?
That is
golf
for
course
the
fees?
property that we are purchasing from, yes.
Okay, and the last was.
And
account-
that's from bond money.
Yes, sir. It is.
It's for roads and bridges.
Road and bridges, yes, that's the Lamar property, yes.
And then the last account, 130-900-950, pay the airport, it's a transfer, 72,557. Were those?
The transfer that. I will have to look at that one.
I just wondered if that was any of the lost revenue, that we get. from
No,
the-
we have not had that meeting and gotten anything on that. No.
Okay, so you'll let me know what that is?
Yes, ma'am. And if you want to come back to the office after the meeting, I can
Maybe.
look it up for you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Castro.
Aye.
Commissioner Russo,
Aye.
Commissioner Lava.
Aye, unanimous.
I'd like to ask a question, with the contracts. Last time we had DR also, that was after the fact and did the canals. Did we
Yes.
Wait on that.
They are actually all in the contract. We did not do separate contracts for them. We included them all in the same contract for the debris removal. Yes.
So this time around, the debris removal will
We'll
cover.
cover all three of them. We won't have to go out and do separate contracts.
So we'll clean the canals.
Approved canal
Yes.
is only eligible.
The canals had to be approved by
Yes.
FEMA, which they
Yes.
never had been until.
Right, I just didn't
They're
know
like
if
doing
we were
private.
missing a piece.
Now, there aren't
No.
specifically
So
stated.
we've got it all and
Yeah.
it's for any approved PPDR and any approved canals.
How did they get approved?
FEMA has to decide if they'll cover a private canal, for instance.
The PPDR,
last
yes. With the PPDR, there's applications and then
PPDR.
it's personal property debris removal. And you do have to qualify for those also, and there's an application process. And Crowder Gulf and Thompson do it. They do all of the collection of the data and stuff and.
And that included not just canals, if I recall correctly, that was for, sometimes they would go onto private land. That's also PPDR. right?
They had a sheet of what it took to,
Right,
what qualified.
right, how you qualify. And the
FEMA had.
wet debris or marine debris, the canals was called the wet debris or marine.
Instead of PPDR.
No, it's not PPDR.
But in
That
our-
was,
Instead
that
of
was.
just.
In our original
Marine and PPDR.
contract with Crowder, that wasn't included. and that's what-
Exactly.
It's included
And so we
this
had
time where we
to-
don't have to go back and redo it.
Right, but they're two separate deals with FEMA.
Yes, actually, yeah, there were actually three different projects.
What's the other?
Well, you have your right of way, you have your private property debris removal, and then you have your.
Okay.
Right, your marine. There's also another one, which is, but we didn't have any, was the demo. We didn't have any.
So did you include that in the contract
I
too?
don't think we did.
Not for private property,
No,
but we normally wouldn't do demolition on private property.
we didn't have any, I mean, we had volunteers and we had insurance companies, because people found out that they had to turn over their insurance money.
Yeah.
To FEMA,
So in the future, if we
so
ever,
they didn't.
if it turned out to be a good idea to try to.
We would have to
hit
do
up
it.
FEMA for demo, we would have to do a second.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made, seconded, Mr. King. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Actually didn't FEMA have, you had to work with FEMA for Coconut Heights, right? Because there was a bunch of debris on property there that they had to. Yeah, but